But my daughter's in isolation at the moment, so she's normally on dog care duties. So
My son is.
it's horrendous. Right, we've got 31 participants. It's 3 minutes past 8. We do normally have a few people that join us a little bit later on, but first of all, thank you for everybody for joining us. It's our members' evening tonight, and our first members' evening over Zoom. So we don't know how it's going to work. We don't actually know what's going to happen, but we have got a number of our members that have agreed to do some talks for us this evening, and the focus being around their top 10s. So some quite interesting topics and subject matters. Keith is going to talk about minimalistic photography. Louise and Stephen are going to talk to us about travel and documentary. Now, I'm friends with Louise on Facebook. I have never known anybody travel as extensively as these two, so I am really intrigued. Alan is going to speak to us this evening about his locomotive photography, and again we've had quite a few of those in competitions and they've done extremely well. I know Rodger, you're joining us this evening to talk about your woodland photography, which is something that you've really got into during 2020 and in lockdown. Caroline is then going to speak to us about portrait photography and that creative approach she always takes on it. Hoping she's going to share her ideas with us this evening, because that's certainly something that I lack with my photography. Justin is going to talk to us about his top 10 images in general, and then Helena has put an audio visual together on some of her photography as well. So we've got some really diverse subjects and topics this evening, which I actually think it will be a really good, interesting evening. I do want to encourage people, and as I've just said just a minute ago to the guys that are doing some talks this evening, normally in our members' evening, we're sat in the golf club, we've got round tables, we're asking people lots of questions. It's the opportunity where you generally find out what people's names are throughout the season, because you may not have spoken to them before. Please dive in, ask questions, engage. You know, this is the first time we've done this, and I think it's really important for us to try and keep the purpose of what a members' evening should be about, even though we're over Zoom as well. So if you can dive in and ask loads of questions, I think that will make it much more successful. Just a couple of notices before we start. Tomorrow night is committee meeting. So if anybody has got any topics that they wish to raise, go on the agenda, please drop me a note, a text, a WhatsApp, an email, whatever that looks like, or likewise Helena, Keith, or another member of the committee. I can't always say often enough, we're your committee, and we can only do things when we get that feedback and input from you guys. So I really need to see and hear, are we doing this right? Are we not doing it right? Is there things that you'd like to see, you don't want to see? Please, pass us that feedback on board, because actually that's what we're here for. And then secondly, next week is our Christmas evening. And again, we'd normally be at the golf club, wearing festive jumpers, eating a 3/4-course meal. The wine generally comes out. We have raffles. I can't promise you 4-course meals. That's off the list. You need to make your own. I'm sorry, guys. I can't promise you wine. You need to open your own bottle, but I can promise you Shay and Lynn's famous Christmas quizzes. So next week, you don't just need your laptop. You need to bring your brains. You're not cheating on your mobile phones. So there's no Google allowed, is first and foremost, but it might be helpful to bring a pen and paper, just because we're going to try and do things in a little bit of a different way. We have had a test run. It's not perfect, but it's going to be one of those. We're going to have to go with it. So don't forget next week, Christmas quiz. We've got no idea, but we are going to break you up into teams and see how that all works. And there may be some prizes along the way. So, right, let's kick off. Keith, over to you, please, of first speaker of the evening.
Right, well, this should be fun because I've got 2 screens, so let's see if we can share the right one.
You're first up because you're the expert.
Is that right?
Okay. Okay.
Can you see that?
No.
You can't?
No.
We can see you.
Yeah. Can you see that?
See you.
Just 1 second, Keith. Yeah.
Coming, it's there, Keith.
Have we got it?
Yes. Yes.
What are we looking at?
Right. Well,
Keith's screen on his
before I
computer.
start,
Keith, just a
I've
second.
got an announcement. There's a lot of people chattering. I can hear.
What's that, Keith?
We're just going to mute.
Okay. I seem to be getting some feedback as well, so I hope that disappears.
Everybody, you'll have to unmute yourself again, Keith. 1 tick.
Oh, what's that?
Right, can you hear me now?
Yeah, that's better.
And can you see the screen? Just put thumbs up.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I was going to say I've got a little announcement first. I've just put the winners of the 100 Club up on the Facebook page. And the subscriptions are now due to repeat next year. So we just hope as many people as possible will dive in again like they did last year. I think we made about 300 odd quid for the club, didn't we, Cheryl? Thumbs up? Yes, I think so. Yes. Right. Okay, that's that. Right, let's set this thing off. There. Right. So I've called my talk Seeds of Minimalism. Over the past couple of years, I've had a change in direction of my photography, and I'm now using minimalism more and more in the photographs that I take. But having looked back at some of my past work, I discovered that the seeds were already there. And this is a group of images which were from about, well, certainly the portraits were about 10 years ago. And I was even doing it then. I mean, you can't get much more minimal than that. And then this photograph in the centre, which was from Torridon, that's about 7 years ago. I just saw that and snapped it. So I found that looking back in my work, minimalism has always featured somewhere or other in my work. And here's another set. These are pastel shades taken up in the Uists, North Uist and Berneret. So it was always there, but I somehow didn't take much notice of it. I took it, but never pursued it much further. So why am I doing it now? Right, well, we'll find out in a little while. I think first of all, I better just explain to those who don't know, or to those who want to be reminded, is what minimalism in photography actually is. So I pulled a couple of quotes out initially. So it's anything that is spare or not required and is not adding to the overall effect in an image, so it is left out to reveal the core subject. Or there's another one here, it's a form of photography that can be distinguished by extreme, beautiful or austere simplicity. It emphasizes and focuses solely on the smallest number of objects that you can place in the composition process. So what does it actually do to the image? What are those feelings that can be conveyed with this minimalistic approach? Well, it allows us to show a mood or a feeling of an object or places, and it helps to capture the essence of the subject using various techniques that clarify the image. It also means that the conventional rule of thirds can be largely ignored, and therefore it gives us great freedom as a photographer. It also involves the use of negative space, and this can give a feeling of visual calm in an often complicated environment. So that's what we hope to achieve through minimalism. So how many times do we see or take photographs which are very busy, too many elements, too much going on? making the viewer unsure of what it is you are really trying to photograph. You've heard judges ask, what is the main subject of this image, because there are too many features in it. It might be obvious to you, you took it, but not to the viewer. With a minimalistic approach, that problem is largely solved. Now, even if you don't want to embrace minimalism yourself, everyone should give it a try, as it teaches us to find out what elements are important and what are not contributing to the image. So ask yourself, do we need this in the photograph or that element? And if you look at it that way, you can make your images simpler, and it may help you become a better photographer. This technique has made me see the subject much clearer and has given me more understanding of my own images. For me, it's been quite a revelation, and I am more excited now about my photography than ever before. So it's never too late to realise what you really love about your own photography, but don't leave it as late as me. So minimalism can be achieved with colour or monochrome, and it can have many different subjects as well, as we'll probably see as we go along. However, monochrome is perhaps the purest of the mediums, as you only have the tones from black to white and you can create graphic shapes with it. So although I'm only doing monochrome at the moment, I do intend to have a go at colour. So how did I really get into it? Well, it was a lecture from Neil Hume about 18 months ago, and I suddenly realised that this was the form of photography that I needed to do. It became almost a compulsion, and it was, frankly, my light bulb moment. So these are 3 images from Neil Hume and his work, and I just love the simplicity and the feeling and the mood that these images gave. So as soon as I could, I went out and I took some similar images to see how I could show my work. So this is my group of 3, and it's my homage to Neil Hume. So it was Neil Hume that inspired me to take these. So the techniques used are fairly straightforward, but you need to be aware of composition and how it works, and it becomes clearer as you progress. So what do you need to do, and how do you need to show it? Well, as few elements as possible. Long exposure can help because it simplifies the image. As you see here, the water was moving. All these images are roughly 30 seconds to a minute. Had we seen the ripples in the water, that would have taken something away from the actual railings, which is what I wanted to emphasize. So by having a long exposure, it clarifies the image. So that's one technique to use. And actually, bad weather is your friend. I mean, these wouldn't have worked had the sun been shining very strongly, and these were taken in cloudy conditions. So bad weather is a good thing for minimal photography, as is mist and snow also helps, as well as the long exposure. Other techniques can be involved, like intentional camera movement, lens zooming. All those concentrate the eye to the main subject, so have a go at them. It helps to have an understanding of tone and shape. It helps to be more aware of composition, and in fact this type of photography does make you become more aware. The use of negative space, as I've said, and it can help to get your composition to flow through the image, which is something we're always trying to achieve. Although the outer 2 are quite static, the image does flow through that center one. So that sort of takes your eye straight into the image and keeps you there. So one of those techniques, which I've just said, is long exposure. And this is an image of mine taken soon after I got into this, of a North Sea wind farm on Humberside. Now, what I wanted to take was obvious. It was the wind farm. But using a normal exposure on the left here of about a 60th of a second, all you got was the crashing wave, and that took over from the wind farm. So your eye was going from the wind farm to the wave Was it the wave I was taking? Was it the wind farm I was taking? Well, no, my main purpose was the wind farm, but that method of photography didn't do what I wanted it. So I gave this second one on the right about a minute exposure. And obviously what it's done is it's emphasized the wind farm. But on top of that, you've also got the movement of the waves, although it's very subtle and hidden. You can perhaps see banding here, where the waves have been crashing on the shore and breaking as well. So using minimalism and long exposure, it's created the image that I actually wanted, whereas the one on the left wasn't. Okay. Now, as soon as I got into this, one of the first things I did, I'm sorry, I've just lost me. Yeah, one of the first things I did was join one of these photography groups, and it was Lemag, L-E-M-A-G, and some of you do know it and you're aware of it, but it's a long exposure online photography group promoting mainly long exposure photography. So I joined that, and as soon as I was exposed to a lot of other wonderful exponents of minimalism, it just opened my eyes to many other possibilities. And this, it's fair to say that this publication has subsequently shaped a lot of my ideas on minimalism since. Now, we all need inspiration, so I suggest you go and look at photographers whose work you like and admire, and see what they're producing. So we've got a few photographs now of the photographers whose work has made me think about my own photography. And this first one, as you can see, is a guy called Theodore Kepalopoulos, who is a Greek photographer. Surprise, surprise. And these are some of his ghostly boats. Now, he's used several techniques here. I must say that Photoshop is a technique which obviously helps greatly, but I also have to say that it's not the main technique for minimal photography. A lot of it can be done in camera, so you don't need a huge amount of Photoshop skill, I would say, to help you finish the image. In fact, this Theodore guy gave a lecture through this Lemag website, and he told us how he did this, and the image was just a simple boat. There were a few other boats tied up, a few posts which he's removed, which is a fairly simple thing in Photoshop, and the horizon line had some other elements on it which rather distracted, so he just dropped another sky in, which again is a fairly straightforward job in Photoshop. And I think you can see the same effect on this left-hand image as well. But I just love this type of image. So there's another set of images here. Now, I call this extreme minimalism, which obviously it is. I suppose the temptation is, if you were to follow this through to its logical conclusion, would be to end up with a black dot on a white page. But obviously that wouldn't really be an image. But the boundaries are there to be pushed. And Theodore in this group of images is pushing the boundaries. However, having said that, I think they're quite evocative images. They're certainly images that say and mean something to me. And I suppose they are breaking all the rules. They're 50-50, slap bang in the middle. 50-50, the main element is slap bang in the middle. Here we've gone to 1/3, 2/3, and the only bit of the image which has anything really in it is in this bottom left corner. But for me, the image works. But it's just a question of experimenting and seeing what you can come up with. Right, my next photographer is a colour photographer called Bruce Percy. And I've only just recently found him, but he's a very intelligent photographer. He puts his images together with great insight and very, very good technique in his composition. And his images are very, very well balanced. And I like how his images flow and allow you to enter the image. It's well worth looking at some of his YouTube videos because he explains the technique there as well. I think a lot of these are somewhere in South America, Bolivia or somewhere like that. But it's a wonderful landscape, but I should think very difficult to photograph. And yet he's come up with these evocative images of that part of the world. These are probably, I think the left-hand side is South America again, but I think these two are up in the Arctic. And you see what I mean by taking you into the image. You see these leading lines going in here. So those leading lines go there, they take you to this, and you're moving over to there, and then you're coming back down again. So it's a nice circular movement that this composition is allowing you to do. And there's even lines coming down here the opposite way. Now, he did say in some of his talks, and I hadn't realised, that some people don't see it anti-clockwise, they see it clockwise. I don't know how many of you see that one way and some see it the other. But it would be interesting. Who sees it clockwise? That's coming in here and going around there. Put your hands up. Okay, and how many of you see it the other way around, anti-clockwise? Yeah, there's more see it anti-clockwise than clockwise, but it's not wrong. There's nothing wrong with seeing it the different way because it still has that same effect. And this middle one, I mean, this would be not very much. It'd be a wonderful landscape, but it wouldn't be very much without this lead in here. And that was chosen purposely by Bruce. And the great thing is it fades as well. It doesn't come in as a block of white snow from here. It fades and it takes you in straight away. And you just then look through the rest of the image and come back down. So it's a technique that helps you get into the image. And likewise, this one. Now, this one has got quite a few different techniques in it. First of all, you come in from the right over to this area, and then your eye shoots across to here. And then with the help of this cloud, which is a wonderful addition, I mean, he was very, very lucky to get that. It takes you up there and then back down again. And if you notice, this line is also mirrored by this line. So that's a fabulous technique, and it's like a Z the wrong way around, really. But it's a wonderful technique for taking your eye into the image and exploring what he's photographed for you. Right. So what's next for me? It's all right, we're nearly there. I have, as I said, got a renewed enthusiasm for photography, even though I have not been out much with my camera since the lockdown. But I'm determined and I'm raring to go. There are other subjects which I would like to get involved in as well, and one of them is architecture. And this is from a photographer called Joel Shinkelar. And his technique is to blur the sky, which obviously then doesn't create a point of interest. It means you're focusing purely on the building, all the shapes and textures. And he's got this technique of putting tone on different parts of the image to make them interesting and stand out, as he has here. You know, he's got this light band going through here, dark band there, and a darker band here. And it just gives you that feeling of roundness, as does the concave effect on this other side. So he's thought a lot about his images, and his actual architectural images are quite something. But he's not the only one. There are quite a few people who do this type of architectural photography, and I just love it. I mean, this one looks like you're looking down, but actually you're looking up. And I just love the sweep of this building here, and the non-shapes, or the shapes that are cut out, are quite interesting as well. So it's not just the building shape, it's the shape of the space that's left as well. So that's another form of photography which I hope to explore when we get up and going. And this is my final image. Now, this is an image which I created during this last lockdown, and it's for the still life competition. You may have seen it on the photo entry site. Again, it's minimal. It's a different subject, but it's very minimal. And what I wanted to do was create a feeling of serene simplicity. And whether I've got that, it's not for me to say, but I like it. I actually put this on a fine art group web page, and it got 240 likes in no time, and some quite nice comments, which, I mean, those sort of things do spur you on a bit. I'm now much more than I ever was about doing photography for myself, and not necessarily for judges. I'm doing it for my own satisfaction and enjoyment. But doing well in competition and gaining BP results is now an added bonus, not the main reason for me doing my photography. Competition, as it is always, should be used to gain knowledge about our own photography. So there we are. I've given you a brief insight into this genre of photography and the effect it has had on my work, and hopefully it's made you all think about your work and how it might help you enjoy your photography more. Thank you.
Thanks, Keith. Really interesting, and it's also good, isn't it, to see some the inspiration from other photographers. And I do sometimes think, actually, as members of a camera club, you know, how many of us actually do take inspiration from other photographers? How many of us do study other people's works? Or, you know, the big group, how many of us just go out with our camera and snap, you know, and actually it's about thinking about your work and what you want to achieve. And I think Glennis's talk actually really focused on that the other week, and, you know, focusing on what you want to achieve before you go out. And, you know, and I do agree with you. Obviously I have been out and I've shot some of the long exposure stuff, and actually it's not weather dependent, which is also
not primarily, no.
No, it's an absolute added bonus. So what I'm trying to say is there's no excuse, really. I used to use that as an excuse when I couldn't get out of bed on a Saturday morning, whereas now don't really have one, other than I'm too lazy.
So do you think there are any questions there or not?
Okay, any questions from anybody? Anything that anybody wants to fire at Keith?
I don't have a question, but I do have a comment on the inspiration side of things that Keith touched on, really. I mean, I do find that Facebook is an amazing resource for inspiration about photographers. Like Keith has mentioned, that Lamag that's basically a Facebook page. Is that how you use it, Keith?
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, I was reading a comment then. One's come through from Paul Gilligan, which I'm going to answer shortly. Sorry, Helena.
I was just saying that Facebook is an amazing source. There's like She Clips, which is a fantastic resource of female photographers, and I personally have used that Facebook page. A lot of the photographers that are giving us these excellent talks this season, actually, really good resource. And like Keith was saying, the Lamag is a Facebook page where people can showcase their long exposure photography. Yeah, Keith, I was just bouncing back to you to say.
It's Facebook groups that I'm mainly in. Long exposure, Lamag. I also in fine art and long exposure is another one as well. But there are loads of them out there. In fact, there are far too many. You just need to choose them carefully. But the resources are out there, and you know, there's no reason why you shouldn't use them.
And just on those groups, Keith, there is, and just for the rest of the members, there's actually some UK club photography groups out there as well at the moment.
Yeah.
You know, there's UK Club Photography ones where you can get feedback on your images. There's BPE ones, so there's ones that are, you know, whilst you're saying you're doing that photography for yourself, and I completely agree, because otherwise you lose the passion for it if you're doing it for the sake of the judge. Actually, there is that other side of it as well, where you can sort of divert your images to get that feedback before being able to enter into a competition. So always worth having a bit of a nosy at if you're online. And again, and I know Helena, you use it quite a lot, Pinterest, a great source of inspiration and creativity when I know my ideas dry up very quickly.
Right, there's a question there from Paul Gillingham. Hi, Paul. It was about the border on that last image of mine, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yes.
That was put on with a Photoshop plugin, Color Effects Pro, and it's got a facility there to put borders on your images. So what I actually did on that one was one thing I don't like about fades on an image, I don't like a white fade. There's very, very few images that actually look great with a white fade. But that particular image, do I need to put it up again?
Please, yeah.
Or not?
The other way you can do it, not just obviously on Color FX, but you can add it with a stroke as well. So there's the facility.
Yeah.
If you don't want a white vignette.
Yeah, but this creates. I'm going to have to share this screen again somehow. No, I've lost it. You'll never mind. Anyway, yes, it's a Photoshop plugin called Color Effects Pro, and as I said, there was a facility there for putting all sorts of different shapes of borders. And like I was saying, I put a white fade on this because I felt it's the only image I've produced which actually would carry a white fade and carry it off. A lot of images just look funny with a white shade. But because of that white shade, I needed something to put the image in. So I did this border in Color Effects Pro.
Yeah, I did feel that with that image, if it didn't have a border, it would lose all its impact. It would disappear to the edge without anything.
Absolutely. It would just fade into nothing. Yeah.
Yeah.
But there is that facility. Obviously, you can. It's not just about obviously monochrome. You can do it for any color, just by inserting a stroke in Photoshop as well. So there's a number of ways of being able to do it. So it's worth having a look at.
Yeah.
Super. Thanks, Keith. Louise, Stephen, are you ready?
Yeah. Just give us 2 seconds to get our screen shared.
No problem.
You selected the wrong desktop. There we go.
Okay, can you see that?
Yeah, I can see that. Perfect. Thank you.
Sure. So when people have asked us what our favourite place is to visit, it's been a bit of an impossible question. Whenever you go, you know, on a holiday, you meet people and say, oh, where's the best place? Where do you recommend? But I just find that a complete nightmare question because there's so many places that have different things to offer. So when Charlotte asked us to do this presentation and asked us to pick sort of 10 favourite destinations, it was a slightly easier task, but even then you might notice there's a few kind of places we've left off, even though we really love them. But we're hoping that the 10 favourites we've chosen, that we'll be able to share the sort of reasons why they're in our top 10 for tonight, why we think these places are so special. So this is our wall map that we have hanging in the hallway. Unfortunately, you won't be able to probably see the pins on there, but if you could see them, you'd realise we haven't actually been to that many different countries. But some of the locations we have visited might be considered a bit more unusual, shall we say. And it's a bit of a running joke with our friends and family when they ask us where we're going on holiday. They know we're not going to say we're going to go sit on the beach for a couple of weeks and get sunshine. And when we do tell them where we're going, often we get either a blank look or a, why are you going there? So one of the other things you'll probably notice, there's a bit of a theme in most of the places we've chosen, is that we tend to obviously go for a lot of places where wildlife is, you know, something that we find really interesting. So apologies if you're not into your wildlife, but hopefully there'll be something there of interest. So for lovers of wildlife, you might expect us to pick one of the well-known safari destinations, such as Kenya or Tanzania, obviously home to the big five. And although we love visiting these countries, there was one species that we sort of dreamed of seeing, and we can blame our favourite naturalist, Sir David Attenborough, for that. So if you haven't already guessed, then when I tell you the location is Rwanda, that might give you a bit more of a clue. So in 2012, we visited Rwanda to see the mountain gorillas. And this was before, you could probably just about see the camera in Stephen's hands, before we got into photography. And this was more about going and enjoying places, enjoying the sights, and taking kind of just sort of snapping photos of, you know, for records. But this was I don't know if you can tell from my expression, it was a really breathtaking experience. And it nearly didn't happen, as I got really sick the day before we were supposed to be trekking, and I had to spend the following day in bed, which is when we were supposed to see the gorillas. But our fantastic local guide managed to change our permits to the following day. So when we did get to go, it made it that extra bit special. And you know, when you see the silverback, the size of them, they're just so powerful. And all the gorillas in the family, their facial expressions, you can't help but sort of see similarities to humans. And despite their size and their obvious muscle, it's amazing how quietly they can move through the undergrowth. They would suddenly pop up very close to you, and you just didn't know they were there at all. It's definitely not at all like how I walk, or I tend to sound probably more like an elephant.
So where did it all begin photographically for us? So we'd heard so much about the wildlife of South Georgia. So when we saw a dedicated trip come up, we basically put our names down as soon as possible. But the trip was unusual because it actually spent 8 days sailing around South Georgia, instead of the usual 2 to 3 days where you just normally go past it onto other places. What we didn't realise at the time, but it basically turned out to be a photographic tour. But for us, it was all about the wildlife. So as you can see on this is a viewpoint of one of the bays in South Georgia. And it is basically packed with elephant seals all down on the shoreline. And then the remainder are basically penguins. So it's a huge amount of animal mass in there. And as you can tell from our competition entries, penguins are definitely one of our favourite species. And this is a shot of some adult and juvenile king penguins. So unlike the emperor penguins, which have nice grey juveniles, the king penguins are just basically big, fat, round brown jobs. However, it was this holiday that opened our eyes to the potential power of photography beyond holiday snaps, although it is very daunting as being beginners and amongst lots of experts. I mean, to be honest, you can see from our images that they weren't that great, but this is the start of our journey to improve.
So for my 40th birthday, we went somewhere that wasn't a wildlife-based holiday, and I didn't actually know the itinerary at all. Stephen had booked the whole thing. I knew which country we were going to, but the itinerary was a surprise for me, and it was only revealed on a sort of every 2 or 3 days when we changed location. And that location was Chile, which has a fantastically varied landscape, even though it's this real narrow strip of a country. You're probably aware that in the north you've got the desert, and then as you travel south, you go into Patagonia, which is, you know, very different and obviously much colder. And of course, being chilly, you get some pretty good wine to drink along the way. So we did stop over at one of the wine growing regions. So this is us on top of Cerro Toco, which is a volcano in the Atacama, quite close to the border. And this was, I think it was about a day or two after my actual 40th birthday. And we climbed not all the way from sea level, but up to the pinnacle at over 5,600 meters, which is definitely the highest we've ever been on foot. And as you can see, it was worth the walk because the views are absolutely stunning. Yeah, it was definitely worth the effort. So the Atacama was a really interesting environment to go to. Apart from the obvious desert type features, it has these brilliant clear skies, which are excellent if you have an interest in star photography or astronomy. So moving down to the other end of Chile, into the south of the country, into Patagonia, it's probably a landscape that most people are familiar with. This is in southern Patagonia, where we certainly experience wild weather, probably not too dissimilar from Buxton, quite windy, and can be a bit wet, some fantastic hiking. And it's amazing to sort of feel quite tiny when you stand beneath the sort of towering pillars around the Torres del Paine, or to take a boat trip across one of the many glacial lakes where you can perhaps sip a cocktail containing glacial ice. And we also had a really lucky and unexpected spot on one of the journeys, which was to see a puma really quite close. Also in Patagonia, but in the sort of north part of the country, or the north part of Patagonia, we saw these beautiful sort of rock formations, which are known as the Marble Cathedral. You take a little boat trip and travel through the sort of the openings and passageways.
So going back to the wildlife, next trip was the Pantanal, which is a wetland area in Brazil. But you actually visit during the dry season, because this means, say, all the wildlife starts congregating around the remaining waterways that are left. And this was our first trip that was specifically focused on wildlife photography for us. And this was the main reason for going, the jaguar. We spent many an hours searching, going up and down the rivers on boats, and we had several good encounters. This one we tracked for, it was probably about 30 minutes, hunting along the riverbank, although we never did catch it, or we never found anything to catch. There's plenty of other wildlife to see there, such as this giant otter. We saw tapir, anteaters, capybara, porcupine, caiman, fish, and loads of different bird species as well. And quite surprisingly, they're quite easy to capture because they would be relatively close. And here are a couple of female green kingfishers. We also saw several different types of raptors, parrots and macaws, and herons as well.
So light, probably an obvious place you might think of for perhaps northern lights. We went to Andenes in Norway, which is, if you can just about see where the green flag is, those little dots of islands. And when we visited, the timing was really a key part, because we went in late January, and this is just after the country comes out of those long dark winter days where there's virtually no daylight, and in effect you get the golden hour all day. Also, the other reason for taking the trip there was at the time huge schools of herring were gathering around the island, and of course this would draw in a lot of marine wildlife. There was also a possibility of seeing aurora if we were lucky. So this photo is a sperm whale that's fluking, and I promise you the orange colour is genuine. I haven't done any saturation tweaking or anything like that. That's as it appeared, and this golden hour lasting all day, you can imagine the effects you get with the kind of water spray and the sort of misty mountains in the background. And from a whale watching point of view, I mean, we were totally spoiled. You can see quite a lot of animals in this picture, and in amongst those there were sort of dozens of orcas, as well as fin whale, sperm whale, humpback whales, and they're all drawn there because of this specific timing of the herring arriving in this sort of deep water area.
Okay, so next is the Arctic, and in my wonderful Russian, a place called Ostrov Wrangela, or something along those lines, which is probably more commonly known as Wrangel Island. But you probably still haven't heard of that either, because we've never heard of it. It's basically located right at the edge of your map, between Russia and Alaska, in the Chukchi Sea above the Bering Strait. It's only visited by a handful of people each year. There's a Russian military base on the island, but no one actually lives there except for a number of park rangers. And the island is actually only accessible for about 6 weeks of the year, as the remainder of the time it's icebound. But we were a little bit surprised when we arrived to see it was not covered in snow and ice, but beautiful Arctic tundra. However, the main reason we went there was the star of the show was the polar bear. Now, whilst most people will go to Svalbard or Canada, they're basically heavily influenced by humans there. There's too much interaction. On Wrangel, there's no interaction, and the bears are very actually wary of you. In fact, the rangers didn't even need to carry guns for safety, so there's no human and bear interaction. And the island and its local next door neighbour, Herald, is the main breeding place for polar bears, and they can actually be very successful here, as is the case here, because you've actually got 3 cubs, which is highly unusual. And in fact, on one day, we counted over 80 different polar bears. So it was pretty epic. Now, I don't know if anyone's watched the wildlife photography of the year this year, but the winner is a guy called Sergei Gorshkov, and he's actually a regular visitor to Wrangel, and he's actually had several winning entries based in Wrangel, especially the Arctic fox.
So in 2017, our bags were packed for both extreme cold and extreme hot conditions, because we were off to India, probably somewhere that a number of you have visited. And as you know, it's a large country, so there's quite a lot to see there, both in terms of sort of people and iconic places, as well as the wildlife. It's also not an easy place in many respects, with the obvious high levels of poverty, and as we experienced firsthand on one occasion, some very, very scary roads, and also there's sort of a background of corruption that goes on in some places as well. Our first part of the trip was a bit of a gamble. We headed up to Ladakh in the north, so in the foothills of the Himalayas, and that was in search of snow leopard. This photo shows some what were quite fresh pug marks. So when we were out searching, or I say we, our guides, seeing pug marks in the snow was a good sign. It meant they had been certainly close by sort of fairly recently. The question is, did we see any? We were really lucky. Although a long way off, probably a couple of kilometres across sort of the other side of a valley and up a sort of mountain or cliff face, we did see snow leopards on several occasions, and this was all down to, as anyone knows that travels overseas, having excellent guides. And even when they were pointing them out and pointing the scopes, you often still bemused as to where the animal was on the side of the hill. You can see probably from the colouring that they blend in pretty well with the rock face. The main problem I had was hundreds of photos, which I knew had a snow leopard in there somewhere, but I had to zoom in an awful lot, and even finding just this tiny dot of a snow leopard in a picture was quite a challenge. So we also couldn't go to India without visiting at least a couple of the sort of well-known parks. And at Pench, one of the great encounters we had was with this female leopard, and we basically saw her all, just us and our guide. So we had a really nice sort of sighting. We just sat there, sort of stared eye to eye, which was amazing, until another vehicle came, and then she sort of disappeared back into the woods, which was one of the places that was inspired in Rudyard Kipling's Jungle Book. Of course, probably some might say, although they might say the lion is the king of big cats, perhaps the tiger is for some people. Such a distinctive looking and beautiful animal. And the sighting on this occasion, we were amongst sort of tens of cars of tourists all snapping away in a big long queue into Dover Park. But just to see an animal like that in the wild, just padding around, really comfortable and not at all bothered by the traffic jam, was really quite amazing.
Okay, so next trip is basically getting up close and personal with marine wildlife, which sounds a bit scary, but I find it is not so bad. It doesn't involve actually getting wet or too wet. So this was going to the Baja Peninsula in Mexico, which is a very well-known place for whale watching. But there was one place particularly on there, a place called San Ignacio Lagoon. And it's probably the only place in the world where you can interact and play with the wild animals, and these are real wild animals. So this is actually a baby grey whale, and it's probably only 2 or 3 weeks old. You can see it's pretty sizable at that age. But you think that actually playing with the animals is wrong, and almost anywhere else in the world, if you were to do that, you'd probably be kicked out of the park, the country, and be on a flight back home. But actually here it's actually essential, because if you don't splash water over them and rub their head and play with them, they'll basically disappear off and find another boat who is actually really willing to play with them. And it's got to be the best wildlife experience that we've ever had. However, one of the less interesting species to photograph, or one of the less interesting world species, is actually the largest animal that ever lived, the blue whale. It's tricky to capture the size, and because you see very little of the whale above the water. Although I think looking at some other pictures, you need a drone is really the key to do it, to get it from above. And actually, the guide that we had actually did a drone shot, and definitely far better than being on the water side. But not all whales are shy. The humpbacks love to show off. I think it's probably a mating issue, but this one whale we watched it breaching out of the water over 50 times in a row over a period of probably about an hour and a half. So yeah, it's pretty a lot of effort going into that to lift their massive bodies out of the water. But there's plenty of other marine wildlife that we saw, like these flying mobbler rays. Louise also went swimming with the whale shark as well. So good. But just add a little non-marine part to the trip. We headed to mainland Mexico to experience the monarch butterflies. And it was quite an amazing experience just to see them roosting on the trees in their millions and tens of millions. The trees were literally just solid butterfly before they started to warm up as the day come on and started to take off into the air.
So apart from Baja, one of the few places we visited twice, once in 2009 and then more recently a return visit in 2019, was Madagascar. Although it's the 4th largest island, it doesn't, when you go there, you realise it's not that extensively visited by tourists. I mean, I guess it's probably overshadowed by the sort of strong tourist industry in the sort of big game countries around in mainland Africa. Also, if you do go there, you might realise that it's obviously, with its size and its quite poor infrastructure, it's one of the poorest countries in the world. It does mean that it can be quite challenging to get around. both by road and on foot. I mean, if you're travelling the sort of length and breadth of the country, you really need to fly, because most of the major roads were built in the 60s during the French occupancy, and very few of them have undergone any maintenance since. And we certainly noticed the only sort of direction of travel for the roads in the 10-year difference between visits was that they'd got worse. Although saying that, there was one road that was a presidential promise that was being actually repaired. However, it is really worth the effort, because it's a fantastic place for wildlife, and also some cracking landscapes as well. I mean, where else can you go in the world where you can hold a fully grown pygmy chameleon in your hand that is the size of, that's my hand and that's my wedding ring. So it's the size of my wedding ring. And it was so light I could barely feel it on my fingers. It was just like holding a feather or a leaf. And now for something different, which is it's a nocturnal lemur. These ridiculous kind of bat-like ears and this kind of a weird skinny middle finger on one hand, which it uses to find and winkle out grubs from hollow trees. When we visited the first time, we unfortunately didn't get to see any eyes, this is what this is. And so when we came back, we were really hoping that we would, and we fortunately got to see this wild eye. I mean, they're pretty difficult to spot, obviously being night creatures as well. And not only did we get to see this one, but we also saw a second wild eye a couple of nights later. And probably a lot of you think it's really ugly looking, but I actually love it. I think it's a real quirky character. And I think it's got the biggest brain as well as the lemurs, because it has to use a lot of brain power to find those grubs and whittle them out. More well known is the Indri, which is the largest of the living species of lemur. It's got those really distinctive bright eyes and teddy bear-like features. And if you've ever heard the call, it's just this beautiful haunting call that can travel sort of miles across the valleys. I mean, which makes it quite a popular choice. It's pretty easy to access. It's only sort of a few hours drive out from the capital city.
Okay, so our last destination is the Great White Wilderness of Antarctica. So this was actually our third visit to Antarctica, but the most adventurous. For us, there seems to be an inexplicable draw to this enormous desert wilderness. So after 2 weeks aboard a ship, an expedition vessel, we travelled through the roaring 40s, the furious 50s and the screaming 60s. We reached a place that's not even on our map. So it's roughly stuck in the middle of our wall, which is the Ross Sea. And it's probably, I know Wrangell, I said, was fairly infrequently visited, but I imagine this is visited far less. We think there's probably only about 100 intrepid visitors each year, because there's basically one vessel that goes down there twice. And this was one of the draws for us to see emperor penguins. But the other was not wildlife based. It was actually to see the historic huts from the age of Antarctic discovery. So this hut here was Shackleton's hut. It's surrounded by Adelie penguins, and a few of us visitors queuing to have a look inside. And then in the background, you've got Mount Erebus, an active volcano. This photo was actually taken about midnight, because with 24 hours of daylight and only a couple of days to explore the area, there wasn't any time for sleeping. And finally, the huts inside, they've remained the same as they were back in the days, back in around the 1910, 1911, because they've primarily been preserved by the cold. There's been a bit of careful expert restoration here and there, and also very strict rules for the visitors. So this is inside Scott's hut, where we saw his desk and sleeping area. This is before he set off for the pole, never to have returned. This was a very moving experience, walking in the footsteps of the explorers. Any questions?
You've got a speechless audience.
Intro? Okay.
Yeah,
I've got a
definitely
question.
a speechless audience.
I've got a question. Can I ask a question? Do you always, we've done quite a lot of extensive travelling in the past as well, and we always do our own arrangements, ground arrangements, everything. Do you go on organised trips, or do you do it yourself?
These were pretty much all organised trips for a lot of these places, just because they are. You need the local guides and the local experience.
And obviously the kind of boat-based ones, you're looking for the right vessel, and obviously they're run by certain companies or certain leaders. And I think also because most of the trips were during while we're still working, so you're kind of trying to get the most out of that 2 period. And if you know, if you've got all the time in the world, if stuff goes a bit wrong, you probably don't have to worry about it. But when you're on a sort of bit of a, you know, like a mad rush sort of timeline, and with these trips, you do pack in a lot, and you're literally, because obviously for wildlife, everyone knows you've got to be up at dawn and around at dusk as well. And if you're lucky, you might get a kip in the middle of the day, but you'll probably be either looking at photos or just wandering around, taking a bit more in. Which is what I normally do while everyone else is sleeping. So yeah, mostly those trips, but I know we didn't include New Zealand, which was our sort of longest trip we've been on, and that we did. That was a forerunner to going to the Ross Sea, and we did do that ourselves because obviously that's straightforward, speak the same language and quite a relaxed place to get around. But I think probably most of the places were maybe a bit more specialist in some respect. I think the Panther, you could probably do bits yourself as well. We know some people who've done their own itinerary, but that was kind of our first foray, so I guess it was a bit of a testing ground. And again, Madagascar, probably if you were confident and your French is reasonable and you had plenty of time, it's obviously being one of those places like a lot of Africa, you can't rush things. You've got to go with the local time, which is just I mean, for example, when we went to the place to see the eye and lots of other species of lemur, I mean, those photos just don't do it justice, because there's just masses and there's like amphibians and birds and everything, insects. The road we took that was improved since last time was in the middle of being built, literally. We suddenly got stopped. There was a traffic jam, one policeman, no traffic lights or anything, and they were basically blasting rock to lay the road with no idea how long we were going to be there, whether we were going to literally have to. And we'd already been in the car for, I don't know, 3 hours or something, 4 hours. We missed lunch and that, and we were just sat there in the baking hot sun in a queue, no idea whether we'd be sat in the car, like having to sleep in the car and then get to the place the next day. But in the end, it all just suddenly started moving. We got a move on. We got there, found out there was an eye nearby. It was like, quickly, the lights going, try and get up there before it gets dark and you fall over and break your neck or something, climbing up and down, up and down, up and down in between trees, and just throw your stuff on and just get going. It's one of the few times I think I actually sprinted. and on another occasion, we were up and down in a place called Marrakesh, which is hillier than the Peak District, with like an arm wrapped around a tree on the side of a hill, trying to take a photo of these lemurs, you know, bouncing around the canopy. I mean, the photos are terrible, but the experience was entertaining and fun. you can't go expecting a brilliant photo. You just have to go and love it, really.
Thank you.
Any more questions for Louise and Stephen? No, nothing. Thank you so much, guys. Really interesting, and I knew you were going to show us some belter of images. I absolutely knew it, and there are some belted in there. So thank you so much for sharing, and actually, you know, some real travel inspiration as well for not just myself, but I'm sure for the rest of the club. So we will take a break, but I just, Alan, can you do your presentation before we take a break, if that's all right, please?
Sorry about that, I'm just unmuted. Yes, I can do that. I can whip through it.
Thanks, Alan. Are you all right sharing your screen?
I'm going to give that a shot now. And with a bit of luck, you'll see a Jack Russell Terrier.
Super. We can see.
Can you see it?
We can, yeah.
Ah, it's disappeared. Okay, I'm going to talk about photographing steam locomotives. I've got about 30 images, but I'm going to flip through them pretty quickly because not all of them are worth looking at for very long. In terms of a background, I was brought up on an estate that backed onto the Bolton-Manchester railway line. So train spotting was a natural hobby, really. And here's my train spotter's book from 1962. As you can see, it's still immaculate because in those days, nobody ever took their book out. What you did was you took a piece of paper and a pen, and when you got back home, you underlined the locomotives that you'd seen. Now, there's two things here. It's so important, I clearly did it in red. And secondly, you know, for me as a 13-year-old, those are quite neat underlined entries. So if you think about the 1950s, 1960s, it really was a black and white era. To try and put a point on that, when England won their one and only trophy in 1966 in the World Cup final, that was virtually the first time that any colour images were shown on a TV. When I watched that match on a black and white TV, I remember that. So for me, steam railways are a black and white thing. And this is a shot taken at Ramsbottom. And by turning it into a monochrome image, it does help to nullify the modern day dress of the passengers on the platform. Now here's a pretty boring shot of Cheltenham. It's trundling past me pretty slowly. And the point I wanted to make, the reason I put this in, is that to take a good photograph of a locomotive, you need steam. And this was one taken at Bury railway station. It was absolutely chucking it down, as you may be able to see. And the reason I chose this one in particular, first of all, is I drove it later in the day. And secondly, I've noticed that if you take a photograph of a steam locomotive coming out from under a bridge, there's accumulation of steam and smoke, so you get a better effect than if you just take it in the middle of the countryside. Locos have faces, and this one's a pretty dirty face. It could do with a bit of a wash. So taking photographs of steam locomotives, this is the natural way they drive, forward. As a little aside, it's an elderly set of carriages, and it's worth mentioning, I think, that you can see the wheels underneath the carriages. Well, originally in the Victorian times, what they did was they actually took old stagecoaches and plugged them on those wheels. So I think that's how we've got the word coaches. So here we are coming along. If you get to the end of the line, unless a heritage railway has got one of these turntables, the engine has got to go backwards on the return trip, like this. Now, I think this photograph works, and the only reason it works is that the tender on the smaller, the front locomotive is quite low, and you can actually see the crew behind it. More often is the case is you're looking at a locomotive like the one behind it, the lighter coloured one, where the tender's quite high. And if you wait half an hour for a train to come back, and then you're confronted with a tender first run, it's a bit of a waste of time and a bit disappointing. So it's just something to look out for. What I'd like to talk about now is the concept of a line-side pass. What a line-side pass does is it enables you to get down to the rails. And this is a shot I took about 7:15 in the morning as they're steaming up, ready to go out of the depot. Now, to get a line side pass where you can definitely improve your photographic angles, you've got to apply in advance. You have to pass a safety test. What they do is they give you a few pages of safety rules to look at, memorize, and then you've got to fill in a questionnaire. And it's the sort of thing is you need to know what signals to give to the drivers to make sure they know you've seen them. So that's, I think, one way you've got to hold your left hand up. And you need to have good hearing, good vision, and be reasonably good on your feet. That enables you to walk the line. And we walked the line from the shed up to Sheringham in Norfolk, and we heard this coming round the corner. So I scrambled up the bank, and this was the shot I got. It's quite unusual to get that much smoke. And the reason probably is that it's working hard because it's going slightly uphill. Now we've arrived at Sheringham. I have to say there are no penguins in this talk. The reason I put this one in is it's quite good to put the buildings in. A lot of them are Victorian, quite interesting architecture. And rather than just a run of straight locomotives, it does add a bit of difference to what we're looking at. Moving from that, the Victorian architecture and objects are also worth having a look at. Quite often the platforms are staged. Those milk churns are very, very clean. And you can wait for people to move out of the way and you can get some really nice shots. Here's another boring shot, and the reason this is in is to let you know that railway locomotives in the UK always drive on the left. It's like the roads. In the States, they drive on the right. In the UK, they drive on the left. So if you're waiting for a locomotive to come in, passengers will always almost certainly get off on the left. You can't see the wheels on this from this angle. So you can go and have a chat with the driver, but you don't get a shot of the full locomotive. So you need to think about what you're trying to achieve, whether it's that or going and having a chat with the driver. Another thing I wanted to just bring out is to try and eliminate modern day objects. I like this photograph, but the driver has got a sort of 3-year-old coffee cup in his hand, a paper cup, which completely takes it out of the 1950s and puts it on a heritage railway. So some people may be clever and be able to eliminate that in Photoshop, but I had to wait for him to come back and use his enamel mug, and then I got a far better effect as a result of that. The people on the heritage railways know they're being photographed all the time, and it's quite a good exercise to go around and see what people are doing. This chap was obviously cleaning up the front of this Great Western loco. This guy is filling the tank with water. Now on the bigger locomotives, the tenders, I didn't know this until I drove one. I thought they were all largely coal, but it's 1/3 coal, 2/3 water. And the tenders can take something like 5,000 gallons of water, and they need topping up during the day. You wouldn't want the water bill on the heritage railways, and you wouldn't want the water bill on the heritage railways, full stop. Here's a chap who's just about to fire the locomotive up. He's taken the coal out of the tender and he's about to turn round and put it in the firebox. Back with the steam again, you can see how the steam adds quite a bit of atmosphere. They're coupling up, ready to go off on their next run. Now this guy is not about to punch me in the face. What he's got in his right hand is a token which gives him priority on that single track line. And what he's going to do is he's going to give that up and he's going to take the token for the next section of track without stopping. So that's why he's got his fist out, ready to take the hoop of the next token. This guy, I waited and waited and waited, and eventually there's a lot of waiting around on heritage railways. Eventually managed to get him to mirror his face in the window. Again, I think smoke adds to the effect. Like a lot of subjects, locomotives can take detail shots, or you can take detail shots. Here we are at the front of one. This is the fireman's workstation. As you can see, it's pretty primitive. He's got his priorities right because he's got his tea keeping warm. But the controls are absolutely basic. They really are. Here we are on what I would call a steam day. About twice a year, the heritage railways have steam days, and they're very special events. What they do is they try and run as many locomotives as possible during the weekend. They're invariably something like March and November, because what they want to do is generate as much steam as possible in the cold air. If you think about a winter walk, when you breathe out, oops, oh no, remind me later. Am I still with you?
Yeah, but we can't see your locomotives. We can just see your
neither can I. That update. That update has really just taken them out. That was, did I want an Adobe Player update? There we are.
Try. Yeah, there you go.
Oh yeah, can you see that?
Yes.
Good. So what I was saying is they're invariably in sort of March and November time. And what I was saying was that if you go for a walk in the winter, some days, if it's cold enough, you can actually see your breath in front of you. And that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to generate as much steam and smoke. So if you go on one of these days, make sure you wear a vest. They also have theme days. And here are the Hotsy Totsies as part of a 1940s event. So that gives you different opportunities to just straightforward locomotives. And on these events, you don't actually know who you're going to meet. And this guy was remarkably similar to the man himself. So that's the end of my presentation. I hope you've found something worthwhile there. What I want to do now is to really improve my monochrome editing and printing, because that's what I really am feeling a little bit short of at the moment. So that's my project for 2021. And what I thought I would do is I put some hints up on our Facebook page tomorrow, so that anybody who's interested in going down this road can just look at that from time to time. Thank you.
Thanks, Alan. Sounds really interesting. And like you say, sharing that information on Facebook would be handy as well, because like you say, that line pass and sort of the elements there actually are really interesting. And you know, you look at an image, but actually the journey that you go on to achieve that image is obviously quite extensive and like you say, quite interesting to people, because unless you know, you just don't know, do you? So no, thank you so much. Really, really interesting. I don't know if any members have got any questions. No, perfect. What we'll do is we'll take a quick break. It is not, we have overrun slightly, but if we can sort of reconvene at about 9:28. It's 9:22 on my machine. I'm not rounding it up, Lynn. I can see you laughing and looking at your watch. We're going to do 9:28. And Rodger, if you could kick off, that would be fantastic. All right. Cheers, guys. Thank you. Rodger, are you ready to share your screen, please?
Yeah, I think so. Okay. So, there we go. Can everybody see that?
I can see your screen, Rodger. I just can't see the presentation. I can see sort of your desktop.
Oh,
Just need to open the presentation up on your desktop.
again. See if this works. No.
No. Is your presentation open on your machine?
Yeah.
So if you go to screen share down at the bottom, you'll see a number of images of your desktop, and you just need to choose the one that's got your presentation open on it.
Share screen. Oh, the share screen's gone blank. Ah.
Right, one second. Let me end. Rodger, just end the current share screen and just try it again for us, please.
It's not coming up with share screen now. Got back to meeting.
Is there, have you got like a green box at the top that says you're currently sharing your screen or something like that?
No, it's just come up with the date now and the time, and it says back to meeting with white arrow in an orange box.
Right, click on that.
But nothing's happening.
No.
Right, this one sec. Right.
Okay.
Try again. We've just booted you out. Try again. Yeah, we can see you.
You can see that now.
Yeah, perfect.
No, I won't. Hang on. Oh, let's start from beginnings, not...
We can see him, Rodger. Just click through him. It's fine.
Can you see okay?
Yeah, it's nice size on my screen anyway.
Okay. If you can hear a crunching in the background, it's Georgie the dog. He's just decided to bring his chew stick up. It's giving me a bit of background music, I think. So, yeah, I think I've slightly misunderstood tonight. I thought it was like your 10 personal favourite photographs, which is what I've done. But at the end, the last 3 are to do with woodland photography, and I'll explain a bit more about those.
Rodger, it doesn't matter. It's your interpretation. Just honestly, just go for it. It's absolutely fine.
Okay. Right. So the first one, this is one I took when I lived in Spain. I probably took it about 5 years ago. And where we lived every summer, there were plenty of sunflower fields. I have a lot of photographs with, you know, sunflowers stretching way back into the distance. But this was one I took where I tried to isolate just one of them. And it was really a case of waiting for that cloud, which was moving very slowly, to move over to the left-hand corner of the image. Bear in mind, this was in about 35 degrees centigrade, so it was hot. Where's my mouse gone now? Oh, I've lost my mouse now. Oh, come on.
Rodger, you can use your down arrow and it'll click through them.
Oh, will it?
Yeah.
Oh, there it is. Okay, so this was a series of 3 images that I put together. They're complete composites based, you know, bits taken out of other photographs, lots of textures, etc. You can see some sunflowers in the bottom there. And they were based on a poem by Simon Armitage called Killing Time, which he wrote for the millennium. I think it was published in 1999. And there were 3 parts of the poem which kind of inspired me to create this image and the next 2. I won't read it all out because otherwise it's going to be too long. But I was quite pleased when we had the speaker Glenys Garnett, and she was talking about her latest project, which was inspired by a poem by Robert Frost. So that was that was interesting that she was doing, you know, that kind of thing as well. So probably the next 2 images are the ones where I've composited the most in any image and used textures in any image. So this is the next one. I do quite like this because I like Simon Armitage's kind of quite dry, almost cynical sense of humour, and I can hardly read this now, but this one reads, Scarborough Beach on Good Friday, sandwriting says Jesus is Lord. Letters come and go. On Sunday, he's lard, lurid, blurred. By Tuesday, he's bored. And just appeals to me, that kind of thing. And then this third one was based on another part of the poem where the poem is actually a book. It's one long poem. And this was based on another part of the book where I think he was talking about a program that came out then called Castaway. And it was one of the first sort of reality TV things, a bit like, you know, I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here, but a lot more subtle. And this was where a group of people were actually put on an island in Scotland. I can't remember which island it was. And they had to live there and survive for a period of time. Was it Tarrantay? I can't remember.
Tarrantay, yeah.
Tarrantay, yeah. So yes, and it's just a little bit about what the program is supposed to do. For example, adapt, evolve, how basic problems are approached, and how huge differences in personality are finally resolved. So I do kind of like that sort of dry, cynical approach that he has. Okay, the next image was one again that I took in Spain, and one of the things I did in Spain was teach English. I had this group of adult students, and I said to them, I'd really like to take some photographs of them looking at this whiteboard full of, you know, grammatical English things which we don't, as English people, we probably don't really learn at all. But the Spanish people are very much into the grammar. So this woman, Nuria, she was a pharmacist. She turned up. We arranged a time, and there were 2 of them turned up, and she turned up. And I had this idea of you know, taking her from the back, sort of scratching her head, looking at all these things on the board. One of the things I do is I do some stock photography. I have photographs on the Shutterstock site, and this one is actually sold, well, last time I looked, which was a few months ago, it's actually sold over 300 times. And I think it's probably publishers that are producing, you know, English as a second language books, and they're looking for photographs. It hasn't made me rich. I get about 25 US cents per photograph. But after a couple of years, it's usually enough to buy a little bit of camera gear or something like that. So the next image, this was very much inspired by a speaker we had at the club a few weeks ago. I'll try and pronounce the name. It was Polina Plotnikova. And she did a fabulous presentation on flower photography and still life photography. And she talked about a part of her work that she does called, I think it was called Dancing Flowers or Flowers Dancing. And so this was my sort of humble attempt. I've actually put it in the still life competition, and it was my humble attempt as trying to produce the kind of work that she was creating. But I had a lot of fun doing it, and yeah, it's just one of my personal favourites. It was done, the flower was photographed in light box with a black background, and then the part at the back is using ICM, and then in layers just finding the best one of those ICM. I took many shots and trying to combine it to get that effect. Okay, so moving on. Yeah, this was well, during lockdown, I spent a bit of time doing some online courses, and one of the ones I did was by Matt, I can never pronounce his last name, Matt Klowski. He was a big buddy of Scott Kelby. I don't know if they've fallen out or something now, but he does his own courses, and they were basically using textures, and a lot of the work he did was using textures with animals. This is a shot I took probably about 3 years ago in the Highland Wildlife Park near Aviemore, and there were just plenty of deer around, most of them static. So I took this shot and then used some of the approaches that I learned from that course to use textures, various things on it really, various textures that I used and overlaid, and turned it into black and white, which I thought worked quite well. And I just like the attitude of the deer. I thought it's, and I titled this Proud, which I thought sort of summed up the photograph really. Okay, so into the woodland photography. And this has become a bit of a project for me this year during lockdown. Various reasons. I've always been interested in woodland photography, but the problem with woodland photography, it's very difficult getting compositions. You know, you walk into a wood and nature just seems to be all over the place. I like woods. I don't know whether it's something to do with childhood, where I used to live, and there was a field we used to call the Horses Field, and around the edge of this Horses Field were lots of bushes and trees, and we spent a lot of time in there as kids building dens. I like the calmness of wood. I like the peacefulness you get in woods, and also it's kind of edgy nature, because woods can be quite dangerous. You know, they can they can be dangerous and quite sinister places to go. So, and the other reason is that during lockdown, I didn't want to stop my photography, so I was shooting a lot more locally. And of course, around here, we have plenty of woods. So, you know, I was never having to travel very far to get to these places. One of the photographers I follow on YouTube is a guy called Ian Worth. And I really like his YouTube videos. He's a great photographer, I think, and very laid back, very modest. And he does one-to-one courses. So in the summer, I went on one of his one-to-one courses. He lives just outside Peterborough. And it was a tremendous day. I mean, not the best time of year to go in the summer, but it was late summer. But I did learn a lot on that course about looking for compositions, and I think looking for things that we kind of normally would walk past and probably not bat an eyelid at. So yeah, that sort of got me into woodland photography. This is one I took on the day. Different time of year, different you know, different conditions. It would have been a very different photograph, but I quite like the composition, and I like the little bit of bracken that is just beginning to turn, you know, an autumn colour in the bottom. So I ventured out on my own. I took some terrible ones before I took this, but that's the way of learning, isn't it? You decide you're going to do something, and I always think that if you're doing something, trying to be creative, you need to make lots of mistakes and learn from those mistakes. So hopefully I'm beginning to do that. The next one was taken at Padley Gorge, and this was taken about 3 or 4 weeks ago. What attracted me on this particular day was the light which was shining directly on that tree. So then it was trying to figure out a composition that I could use based around the tree. And one of the things I learned on the course was woodland photography needs separation. So the worst conditions to go out in are very often the best conditions, because the rain will give the texture. The mist in the background will help with that separation. So it's not an easy thing to do, but it's always looking for, you know, elements that will help you achieve that. And on that day, I was quite fortunate in that there was quite a bit of mist in the background. And it was then a case of trying to find some interest in the foreground, trying to find barks of the tree that kept you in the frame and were sort of going the right way, you know, all these kind of things I had to take into consideration. But personally, I quite like that one. And my final one, which was again taken in Padley Gorge about, well, the end of August, end of October. And I've actually called this one Covering the Past, because I like the way the leaves are covering the stone. There again, it could have been improved with some mist in the background or maybe a shaft of sunlight, but I quite like the circular stone and the way the rocks replicate that sort of circular movement. And of course it's autumn, so it's a fantastic time of year, all covered in leaves, etc. So yes, so this is what I'm on. I think, you know, try and keep going out as often as possible and taking more of these, making more mistakes, and hopefully, you know, getting more successful images. So this is kind of my latest project. So a bit of a wide variety of photographs there, but yes, anyway, that's it.
Thanks, Rodger. Really much appreciated it. A real diverse range of obviously photography and topics there. And I think actually as a club, you know, when we look around, we have got so many skills and so many different interests as well. And that's obviously what makes us so diverse. And when we had obviously our interclub competition last week, all right, we didn't win, but we were pretty close as a second. And you know, I know that when we were going through and choosing our images, actually it was a really difficult process to actually move through, because actually we have got that diverse range of topics to choose from, and that in itself you know, can be extremely difficult. But thank you so very much. Caroline, are you ready to share your screen?
Has anybody got any questions before?
Has anybody got any questions for Rodger before Caroline? It's silence. That's what we always get. Okay. That's not a bad sign. That's a good sign.
They can all wake up now.
Caroline, are you good to go, hun?
I think so.
Do you want to? Can you share your screen?
Yeah, I don't know what I'm doing.
That's all right.
Hang on. Have you got anything?
Yeah, we have. I can see your images. Yeah, that's fine.
Right. Okie dokie. I don't know how I'm going to follow that lot. Some fantastic presentations tonight. When I joined Camera Club and saw the very high standard, particularly the nature and landscape, I thought I could never take photographs like that. I don't have the skill or the technical knowledge, so I thought, well, what can I do that's a bit different? So I decided to go for impact and just hoped that I could bluff my way through the technical side. To a certain extent, I still am. During our travels, I came to realise how much I enjoyed photographing people. Their faces tell so much, their history and their stories. So people it was. I progressed a little to studio photography, but with this, found the images often uninspiring. So with Photoshop, I played around until I created an image that I liked. I like the unusual and wacky. I think sometimes Steve despairs. Like when I asked for Christmas, I asked for a straitjacket and a stuffed white rat. He just shook his head in disbelief. I haven't told him yet that I have this idea involving a whole octopus. I'm not looking to create nice images, and I love it when people say, well, I want to hang that on my living room wall, and I think, great, that's a result. Anyway, on to my first image. This is called Alone with Myself. This was taken at a shoot where I didn't come away with much. It happens.
Okay, Caroline, can you double click on it and just open it up to make it a bit bigger? Is that possible?
Yeah. That better?
I can't.
That better?
No, just one sec.
Try double click to open it.
Double click on the actual image?
Yes, try that.
What you got to do, Caroline, you know where on your screen there should be a green box at the top?
Yeah.
If you click on that, it should then say share.
New share.
New share?
New share, yeah, and then you need to, so if you click on that, and then you have to choose the photo.
Has that happened?
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
So you should just be able to, with your right arrow key, just tap through them now, hopefully.
So you can click through them, Caroline, like just with your arrow keys on your laptop.
Hopefully.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so this is called Alone with Myself. I didn't get much from this shoot, so I started playing around with this image. I created a double exposure using Nik effects and added a texture to make it look a bit dreamy. So from a nothing image, I created one that was okay. Half the time, I can't even remember what I've done with my images. I just play around. I'm not brilliant with Photoshop. I'm slowly learning. I don't know if anybody uses textures, overlays or backgrounds, but what I did find is with Photoshop 2021, that recently came out, it had a section called Neutral Filters, Style Transfer. And I thought, what a load of rubbish. I can't see me ever using this. However, I found that by running any simple texture through these filters, it can give a really interesting result to use as a background or a texture or an overlay. There are about 40 different styles to choose from, all giving a basic texture a completely different look. I haven't used any of these in the images tonight, but I have used them in other images. I'm just trying to move.
I don't know. That's it.
What you might have to do, Caroline, is just click on that green box again. Go new share. Share, and then choose the screen that's got all your images on. Double click on the next one, and then go to new share again and select that one.
Have you got that?
You have to go to the green box again and go new share again.
We have this all the time with speakers.
Have you got it? No?
No.
Yeah, we got it, Caroline.
Yeah.
Okie dokes. That's just like one of the textures. It was just a simple image of a cushion in our living room. And I just ran it through the neutral filters and it came up with that. And I thought, wow, that's quite good. So it's just sort of an idea if anybody uses textures, overlays or backgrounds, that type of thing. Right, I just need to move on to my next image then. Right, this image is called Beauty. Have you all got this image, yeah?
We can see it, Caroline,
yeah. Yeah. This was taken at a remote shoot. Not exactly creative, just a standard art nude photograph, but I quite liked it. I never thought I would ever do a remote shoot. I thought it's kind of cheating. But with the COVID restrictions, I thought, what the heck, I'll give it a go. A remote shoot is set up over the internet via Zoom. The model tethers her camera to the computer and all the settings are on your screen. So I controlled the aperture, the shutter speed, the ISO, focus, and chose when to hit the shutter button. I was really impressed. The only restriction is you can't move around like you would normally do in a studio shoot. You have to sort of instruct the model to move more, but it was still really good. I had communications with the model prior to the shoot where we discussed ideas, and she was a very experienced model and the creativity just flowed. I would definitely do another. Okay, now on to my next image. This is called Clarice. The inspiration for this image was taken from Silence of the Lambs, an old scary film. The photo of the girl was taken in a studio in Stockport. The butterfly was taken in Vietnam. I liked the girl's stare, but wanted to create something with a sinister feel. I added dirt and scratches and a texture to give it a little bit more of a scary look. My next image tonight, look to the future. I recently bought some equipment in order to set up a simple studio in our spare bedroom. Just a one speed light setup, and I just needed a model to practice on. So it was, Steve, will you be my model? On this image, I set up the light between the background and Steve to just lighten up the edge of him. I added a little bit of a texture just to add a little bit of drama to the image.
You got a good model there, Caroline.
I know, it's very photogenic.
No. No.
My next image, sour grapes, not totally creative, but I did change the colour of the background just to make it look a little bit more wacky. During the remote shoot, we used grapes as a prop. This was a fun one that we did, and I really liked it, and it has been accepted into 2 BPEs recently. What I have found is that BPE judges seem to quite like wacky and creative, lucky for me. And quite often there's a section in the exhibitions, an actual creative section. This is called She Gazed at the Stars Like They All Knew Her Secrets. Another shot from the remote shoot. I loved the catchlight in her eyes. I thought they looked like stars, so I decided to use a star image I'd got as an overlay to give it another worldly look. I also used a Nik filter. This is called There's a Ghost in My House. This was taken at the abandoned mansion in Manchester. It was a Francesca Woodman inspired shoot. Francesca Woodman was an American photographer. She was best known for her black and white pictures, many featuring herself or female models. Many of her photos show women naked or clothed, blurred, merging with their background or with their faces obscured. She was born in the same year as I was, but she committed suicide when she was 22. Her troubled mind is shown in her images. One of the famous quotes that she made when she was alive was, "Real things don't frighten me, just the ones in my mind." I like the blurriness of her images and the fact that an image doesn't have to be sharp to have impact. To take the image, I set up my camera on a tripod, set a slow shutter speed, about 1 second, I think it was, maybe just a little bit more, and took the shot while the girl in the white dress walked through. This gave it the ghostly effect, and I added a sepia tone to give it an old photo feel. I just loved the old door and the staircase.
It's a fantastic location though at Antwerp Manor, Caroline. It's super.
Yeah, it's brilliant, isn't it?
Amazing. So good.
The natural light and everything there is also really good.
Yeah, it's a fantastic place.
Yeah. What's that? Okay. This image was taken at a studio in Stockport. I like the effect with the shadow, but I didn't want it to look like a studio shot. So I overlaid an image that looked like blinds to give it a bit of a voyeuristic feel. This image is called Warrior. This image was taken during the remote shoot as well. It started out with the model dressed in a bright coloured turban and jewellery, like an African queen. But I'd seen many images of her like this, and I wanted to create something different. I tried several overlays and found one that looked like scratches. So these scratches I coloured in red. I changed the colour of her eyes just to make her look a bit more like an animal. And this is actually one of my favourites. This is called What the Eye Sees, the Mind Believes. I had this idea, so I asked the model to put her hand over one eye and I just used layers to transfer an eye from another image onto the hand. I changed the colour of the background to make her stand out more. This image has recently been accepted into a BPE as well. And that's it. That's my top 10 for tonight. And thank you for looking at my pictures.
Thanks, Caroline. Absolutely fantastic. Some great creativity, and like you say, it's, your ideas are always really impressive. Has anybody got any questions for Caroline?
Caroline, do you want to say where you get some of your ideas and inspiration from?
I think I needed to see a psychiatrist. My mind's just like really weird. Like I said, with the octopus and the straight jacket, but a lot of my ideas are off Pinterest.
Yeah.
But also, I'm on Purple Port, which is it's a site for models and photographers, and I get quite a lot of ideas from there as well.
Mm.
Super, thank you. Anybody got any other questions? Super, thanks, Caroline.
The models.
Justin, are you ready to share your screen?
Yeah, just bear with me a second.
Thank you. If you can hear that, that's my dog snoring. It's not me or James, I promise.
I just where the thing is right where that I can't. How is it gone there? There we go. Just where the drop down was coming. Okay, so yeah, I'm quite new to the camera club, but I've been taking photographs for about 10 years. It's coming up to 10 years in 2021. And when I say taking photographs, I mean taking photographs that I'm fairly happy with. So I'm going to produce a book of my work just for myself. I've never produced a book before. So what I thought was, with my 10 images, I would basically share some of the images over the years, basically. So this is my first one that it's a really old image. It's taken with not an amazing camera. It's really grainy, and it was a trip with a friend to Castlefield. Kind of didn't even have an idea of the kind of photography I like to do. I was just taking pictures of all sorts of things, but I really do like this image for its kind of lo-fi and kind of dirty element to it, so like the noise that's in there. And yeah, it kind of made me think that maybe I have got an eye for photography. So it was kind of a bit of a light bulb moment. There's loads of errors in it if you're looking at it for a competition, but I don't mind that. You can't, this is all blown out. There's a weird light coming across here. I don't mind it because it's my image and it's something that I enjoy doing. And also, the great thing about photography is it's a historical thing for you, and you can remember the moment. So, so that's my first one. This is my second one. So I joined Sale Photographic Society and basically watched images in the competitions, and then slowly got enough courage to start entering the competitions. And basically this is my first win in the open competition in that club. And yeah, so but basically what I started to do, so wildlife photography was what got me into photography. So I've been into bird watching all my life pretty much, and that's kind of what led me into my photographic journey. So in this image, it was taken at Chalton Water Park, and it's taken in the autumn, and this is basically the reflections of silver birch on a tree. So this was taken with quite a long lens. I think it was a 400mm lens, but I think I've cropped it in quite a lot as well. And it's just basically, I was waiting for this coot to be at the right point, and I just kept taking loads of shots. It kept going up and down. And when I cropped it in, I just liked the colours that were there. And this taught me about background's really important, and also having something that's slightly different. If you just photograph a coot on its own, it might be quite boring. So having a like a wow factor background helps. When I look back on this image, I'm quite critical of my work. This bit here, you've got bits of twigs and stuff. I'd never stand for that now, but it won the competition, so I'm happy, and it's kind of, again, it's a historical kind of image for me. This is me kind of few years down the line again, kind of trying, you'll find tonight, or some of the people who might have seen my work, I don't do one kind of photography. I like doing lots of different types. So this is me doing landscape work. This is what I find, this and wildlife photography, I think are the most challenging I find to do, because you're not in control and you need the elements to be right. And people will know this lighthouse at New Brighton on the Wirral. And this was, yeah, kind of a look. I looked at the weather, how the weather was going to be. I'd never visited the place before, and conditions just worked out right to get this image, with the sky, with the bits of blue, and then you've got the orange as well. And just like Keith was speaking about using leading lines, that's something that I always try and do. Get your eye to take you where you're going to as well. With skies, you're not in control of that as much, but definitely with things on the ground you can use to kind of lead people into your images. Me and a friend we kind of learned photography together, and we kind of worked, kind of like bounced ideas off each other. For years I kept saying, oh, I couldn't be bothered doing like portraits, I'm not really interested in that kind of photography. And then I started to do it, and I got hooked, and I got really interested in doing portraits. This is a picture of my partner, who I have to thank for putting up with me going on about photography all the time, and also changing rooms around in the house just so I can do product photography or do shoots or whatever. So partners who put up with their partners do it, like just I don't know, if it was me, I'd probably be really annoyed with or find it annoying, but now and again I can get her in front of the camera. So the idea for this was to kind of do a 1930s or 40s kind of shoot where she looks like one of the wrens kind of look. That's what I was going for. What I find with portrait photography, I always think you need a theme rather than just take a picture. I think if you've got a theme and you try to go for that, I think it's, for me anyway, trying to tell a story of what I'm trying to get anyway. The other thing about doing portraits is try to get that look, try to get, especially if they are looking at the camera, is getting that eye contact as well. Moving on to pets. So I decided that with my kind of knowledge that I'd gained around using lights and things like that in the studio, I'd try photographing animals, especially like pets. So where I used to live, there used to be a big field behind my house, and I built the courage up just one day just to ask this person, can I photograph your dog? And she had 2 greyhounds, and she said yes straight away. She said, yeah, no problem. And I said, okay, I'll come to your house and I'll photograph both of your dogs. And what the idea I had was, I have got a softbox with my strobe lights, and I basically lay on the floor, put the softbox over my head, and had the dog in front of me with the owner behind, and just took lots of shots. This portrait of this dog. She was called Grace, and she was a rescued greyhound. She was quite big, quite a large greyhound. And again, what I was speaking about in the other image, that contact with the camera, it's only when I got home and I seen the contact with the dog and the camera that it's just kind of a bit of a magical moment that I've not had before, like not had since when I photographed other animals, where it's just completely looking straight at the camera and almost human-like. So I just find it was chance. That's just the way that I caught it on the on this particular image. This image, I'm going to speak about the power of the internet now. So you put your images out on social media and you don't know who's going to see them. I got an email from Penguin Books, one of the editors of Penguin Books, and they said, we've seen one of your images on the internet and we want you to do, to basically get an image for one of our books. And I was laughing. I thought, this is a joke there. So I looked up the person's name, and yes, she was the editor of Penguin Books. So I said, right, this is definitely for real. She basically wanted me to find a certain breed of dog and do this exact same shoot for a book that they were publishing, which I was over the moon at because I'd never done anything like that before. So I did it, had to find this breed of dog. It was a German dog, and this was the book. So that image there is what I took. I had to draw. I had to find a breeder and take a picture of this. I think they're called, if I'm pronouncing it right, Vardaramas or something like that. That's probably the wrong pronunciation for this breed of dog. But it was really kind of exciting, and I really enjoyed trying to find a breeder and try to copy that image. But I really kind of like promote, when you put things on the internet, you don't know who's going to see them and you don't know what's going to happen. This was an image from some people have been speaking about traveling around the world. This was a trip that me and my partner did when we were traveling around South America, and this was a trek to Machu Picchu. And on the trek there was people using horses going up and down, carrying luggage and stuff like that. And some of the horses were resting, and this was just kind of a grab shot really, where I just wanted to photograph some of the horses that were there, and this horse, just the light fell on it perfectly with this amazing backdrop as well. So yeah, so this this also got into Outdoor Photography magazine, not magazine, the one of the competition books. So yeah, I was quite pleased about that as well. I was kind of liked what Caroline was speaking about making unusual images, especially in portraits. This is a friend of mine who's an extra, does a lot of extra work, and he needed an image of his, he got a brand new suit, and he said, oh, the company he works for need to see me in a suit. And me being a bit quite quirky and like to do things differently, I knew he owned chickens, and I said, can you hold a chicken without it flapping around? And he said, yeah, I've got a chicken. It was called Frank or something like that, the unusual name for a chicken. And he said, yeah, no problem, I can pick a chicken up. So this kind of scene was created. The backdrops, it's quite not unusual, but you would think this is in a studio. This is in a conservatory in the daylight. And this is kind of showing you that when you start using strobe lights, you can overpower the natural light and create images like this, even in a surrounding what might be really bright as well. So this is inside a conservatory, no blinds or anything like that, but the light's overpowering the natural light. Behind, this is like a piece of like muslin that's red, and I've draped it on purpose to create the shadows just for a bit more interest. Lighting wise is a softbox on this side and a reflector on the other, and I've got a light, I've got a speed light behind him just to illuminate the background, and the chicken really behaved quite well. This is a trip to try to remember where we went now, to somewhere in the Caribbean. Forget, mine's gone blank. Hummingbirds are like, for me, are like something magical. I don't see them a lot. I think I've seen them twice in my lifetime on 2 trips, but they're like little fairies. I don't believe in fairies or anything, but when they fly around you, it's just amazing. And this was at one of the places where they feed. So if you've ever been to or go to South America or even America, these places where they'll feed the hummingbirds nectar, and they're a great place to get shots. So I basically set my camera up on a tripod with a long lens, and waited for them to come in, knew where they were going to fly in on the flight path, and just every time they come, took hundreds of shots, and then you look through your shots to see if you've got anything good. Really glad that there's these bokehs behind as well, which I feel like add to the image. This is this is something else I really like to do. So I like to do studio work and take images of different things, but like to try and make things look unusual. So this is an old top off an old perfume bottle. So I had this idea of suspending the perfume bottle top in midair for an abstract, and I didn't know how to do it, and it took me about 5 days without trying, just thinking, how can I do this? And then a light bulb went off in my head and I basically worked it out. So this is how I did this. So I've got a light box that I have in the garage, which I can do product photography in. These are my homemade diffusers, and all they are is pieces of foam board with tracing paper on, and they work perfectly well. If anyone's seen any of my lectures, you know I rave about using £10 lights from IKEA, which have these flexes on that you can move in any place, so it makes it really handy for putting them in exactly the right place. I had to have these cushions here because this could drop out and smash basically, so they're just protecting the glass. That's the other kind of angle with my camera there. This is how I had to tie the top. So this was the problem that I had. I needed to have it suspended so it wouldn't move backwards and forwards. So my idea was to use fishing line. I used to do fishing when I was younger. So I had to measure, if I go back, I had to measure exactly the right length for each of these pieces of line so that it sit right in the middle of this frame. So it's kind of balanced perfectly so it didn't fall forward. And then what I did was I had the two pieces, these are just not flashes, these are obviously natural light, and this was creating the colour on the back. So I was stood there doing that, and I put a gel on the front of my speed light and just held it over the top in my hand to create that image. And what you see, if I fly back to the actual image, that was pretty much the back of my camera when I took the shot. The only thing I've done is remove the wires that were going up and out. This got shortlisted for Close-Up Photographer of the Year just gone. It didn't make it into the top 100, but I was still pleased that it got shortlisted. And then my last image, it's getting to the end of the night and we've gone over a bit, is this one. This is taken not far from where I live, so walking distance, but I did drive here on this morning. And basically when I'm kind of going with Rodger as well, looking for landscapes in the woodland is very difficult. I'm always wanting to go out when it's foggy. When it's foggy, I'll go out and look. If I'm going in the woodland any other time, I generally don't even take my camera and I'm just looking for compositions. A lot of the time, I probably get a shot 5% of the time I'm out. So I go out a lot, but hardly get any images because I'm after a certain kind of shot, and I'm very critical about what I'm after, which is good and bad. The bad thing is you never get your camera out your bag, so you never really use your camera. The good thing is you don't use memory cards up, you don't like waste space on your hard drives. But on this occasion, it was a really misty day or misty morning. I'm always thinking in my woodland photography, I want a light to be something that takes you away from what you're taking a photograph of. So I want light to be in the back. And when it's misty conditions, it's kind of perfect for that because it'll be really light and it'll take your eyes away and help you go through the image. The thing that I don't know about this image is I don't know whether to crop it along here or keep this in. So I toy with the idea of do I crop it? I feel like I need a bit of room before this tree. When I've put it on the internet, I quite like what people say about it. Some people said that it looks like the tree's got his hand in its pocket. Someone else said it looks like it's got a towel over its arm and it's like been in the shower or something like that. I didn't see any of that. I just seen an unusual tree that looked photogenic and it was in great conditions. This is a project I'm trying to do where I photograph parts of the Peak District that aren't obvious or not the common places to go. So kind of looking for the images that are you have to kind of find yourself. Anyway, I will shut up. Thanks for listening. I hope you've enjoyed what I've shown you.
Thanks, Justin. Again, a really interesting talk and a diverse range of 10 images that, like you say, you've shown us this evening. So just before we very quickly move on, has anybody got any questions for Justin? Anything anybody wants to ask?
I've got a quick question, Justin. You talked about how when you share your images on the internet, you get a lot of viewers from all sorts of diverse backgrounds and places that you would never dream of people seeing your pictures. Where do you mean when you say share them on the internet? Have you got a website?
Yeah, I have a website, but generally I use my website just to direct people who I might not know. So if I see someone, I can give them a card and say, oh, you can look at my website, or someone who might want some work doing maybe. But generally I put it on either Flickr. I always say Flickr is my gallery basically, but I use Facebook and I also use Instagram. But I find this is how I view it. Instagram, I always think can be people all over the place. Facebook's for like family and friends. Things like if I wanted to send something to a company, say I photograph some whiskey, because I do photograph bottles of whiskey, I'll use Twitter to get it to the companies then, because I kind of find Twitter's business orientated. So I do use social media in different ways. But it was Instagram, I believe, that Penguin Books picked me up on. But they haven't given me any other work. It was just a one-off thing that they were after. So.
Chat.
Yeah.
Thank you. So our last sort of presentation of the evening is from Helena, and she's got more of a audio-visual presentation of her images. So Helena, do you want to, fingers crossed it's all going to work? Helena, you need to unmute.
Right, elementary problem. Sorry about that. Can everybody see the screen that says contemporary photography?
No, Helena,
as art?
you need to do what Caroline did before to go to that green box at the top.
You share.
Yeah.
Hang on. Can you see my image now?
No.
Can you see that?
Yeah.
Right. Oh, okay. Good. Cool. Yeah. Okay. So this is, like I say, hopefully going to be very quick. Just give you a little bit. Just to give you a little bit of a background to it. My parents were due to celebrate their 60th wedding anniversary, and it was in the thick of lockdown 1. And we have a large family. I've got 6 siblings, and we all live at different parts of the country. So we thought we'll set up a Zoom for them, and my parents being rather elderly, it was a very interesting and new experience for them. And we agreed between ourselves to share something different, whatever we felt like it. So one of my brothers took them on a visual tour of his new house in Cornwall, A different brother, he showed some images of his wooden bench that he carved using his chainsaw. A sister took us on a tour of her garden, showing us her favourite trees and plants and everything. And I, of course, had to do something relating to photography. I look back on my images, some of my creative images particularly, because that was what in May I was really into. And I thought around some of the questions about why I created them, what they meant to me, and importantly, what I thought they might mean to the viewer, because as a couple of the speakers tonight have said, what you see and what your viewers see might be something entirely different. So I created this multimedia presentation and inserted some hopefully thought-provoking quotations in it that I hope you'll find inspirational and possibly interesting too. If when I play this, the sound doesn't play and you can't hear it, let me know, because I can't tell whether you can hear it or not. Shout and I'll have another go at it. So I'm going to put it on now, hopefully. Okay, I don't know whether you can still hear it now, but that's the end of the video. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Helena. A really lovely set of images, and I'm glad you've had your camera out more often than I have during probably the last however many months. I'd just like to take the opportunity to thank each of our speakers sort of this evening, Helena, Keith, Alan, Rodger, Louise, Stephen, Caroline. I think it's been a really successful members evening, and you know, we have overrun, but actually each and everybody's images and the topics, you know, when the note went out, it's diverse, it's interesting. There's a great selection of photography, but there's that story that sits behind it and it means something to the author. And I actually think that's really come across in terms of tonight's presentations, and hopefully has inspired us all to go out and try something new or something, like I say, a little bit different as well. So thank you so much, guys, for you might have felt bullied into it. I apologise, but actually I think it's shown the rest of our members sort of the great talent that we've got, and sort of the journey as photographers that we continue to go on a day-to-day basis. Anybody got anything that they want to throw at me or ask, or anything else? Feedback, any comments?
No, I think it was a great night, as you said, and you're correct. We don't always see it, but we've got a lot of talent in the film, and that's been revealed tonight. Yeah. So it's been very successful.
Yeah, no, really, really successful. And I'm actually really pleased the way it's gone, especially as we haven't done that members evening, as I said right at the beginning, over Zoom. So, you know, we've had one speaker normally every week. Tonight we've had 7, and, you know, some really great topics. So thank you again so much. Like I say, next week, Christmas quiz, pens, paper, brain, no Google. We're going to see how it goes. Like I say, tomorrow night is committee meeting, so if you've got any comments, any feedback or anything like that, again, please let us know. But I wish you all a very, very pleasant weekend, and I will see you all next Wednesday. Festive jumpers, hats, wine in hand, 3-course meal ready. We will replicate the golf course in our own homes, or we will try. So enjoy. Thank you very much, everybody. And I will see you all very soon. Take care. Cheers. See you all later.
Bye.
Bye. Bye-bye.